Hello and welcome to another episode of A Closer Look. In this episode, we take a closer look at the Papua New Guinea Weather Service Institution, return of the International Monetary Fund, who intends to set up office in country, and the Royal Papua New Guinea Constabulary 2023 recruitment drive. But first, in our country, we normally experience two seasons, the wet and dry weather conditions. Therefore, providing weather services is important as it supports services to protect life, property, and the growth of economic activities in the country. In this segment, we take a look at the work of meteorologists and the services they provide.
This is the only weather office in PNG built in early 1970s prior to independence. Of course, the importance of receiving daily weather updates from this office is to know what change is occurring in climate and the effects it may cause to affect our lives. This service was part of the Bureau of Meteorology under Australia during the colonial era. Director of PNG National Weather Service, Jimmy Gomoga, explains this brief history of their services.
Australia just extended its network of observations into Papua New Guinea. But according to WMO, it goes way back into the 1800s. That's when early 1800s or early 1900s when IMO was set up. That was the International Meteorological Organization, but later it was changed to WMO, World Meteorological Organization. And during that time, I think it was in 1949, that's when WMO really started to encourage states to actually set up their own weather systems, own weather organizations in the country, state organizations.
He says in 2009, the office was administratively transferred to Department of Transport. The director says they have been using limited equipment to give weather information.
The atmospheric observations, that includes temperatures, surface temperatures. We also look at surface pressures, so those different kind of equipment. And then we look at radiation data that we have to keep, the solar radiation that comes in and goes out. So those are some of the things that we need to observe. We look at the apaya changes that takes place, so we send balloons through, so we have radio swans that go through the whole atmosphere and then goes up to the top of props, and then actually the balloon breaks. And then that data that we capture, and then we try to dissect the atmosphere, what is happening at each level, from the surface right up to the tropopause. And we can be able to see, okay, this is happening and this is how the atmospheric conditions are, and this is what's going to happen. So that's how we predict weather. We analyze all that information that comes back to us, and then we use it to predict weather. We use it for climate purposes and other things. Talking about the apaya measurements, we actually look at like where the jet stream is occurring, where there's possible the weather patterns or weather in the atmosphere, where the icing takes place, because this is very important to aviation.
With the few available equipment they have, more productive work has been done to ensure accurate report and data is disseminated to inform the citizens of present and future weather conditions. The Weather Office has space monitoring setups that detects the outspace weather.
So just recently, WMO has also mandated the Met services to take on the responsibility of what we call the outer space weather. So we have space weather monitoring also set up within the National Weather Service. And then we use mostly satellite data that comes through to ensure that that information is made available to us. Currently, for National Weather Service, we have two satellite systems here. One was donated by the Chinese, and the other was donated by Japanese. So Japanese one is the Imowari, the latest satellite, and the satellite is right over Papua New Guinea. So we have direct access to that and that information comes in every 10 minutes. So the satellite image comes in every 10 minutes, and we're able to see the changes every 10 minutes that is occurring in the atmosphere or in the top of our atmosphere.
With limited equipment, the meteorologists used available data and information for effective services which are provided to mainstream media, organizations such as newspapers, radio and television stations to inform the citizens. The Weather Office has few instruments at the observation site that gives readings on weather. What is the purpose of this Stevenson screen?
Okay, Stevenson screen, we have some equipment inside here, especially the thermometers and also the barometer, where it takes the temperatures and the air pressure, the equipment. And you can see that it is faced southeast, because that's how the wind direction flows. If you ever look at the geography or the globe, mostly the winds come from the northeast and the southeast to actually mesh. So for the southern hemisphere, we face our Stevenson screens towards the southeast direction, because that's where most of the air comes in from. And then that's, to get the correct weather readings, we use the southeast direction. Southeast direction. For the northern hemisphere, it's going to face northeast. It's because of the airflow, global airflow towards the equator. And we have to build this one about 10 meters, 1 meter high. At certain heights, so that we are able to capture, and it has to be properly ventilated. That's part of the reason we push to the southeast. And the equipment can malfunction if it is not properly aligned, or give wrong or erroneous readings. So basically, it's just to house the equipment. Yeah. So inside here, we have some of the equipment. This is the old type. We have been using like water in what you can see that this wet bulb thermometer and the dry bulb thermometer. We use this to actually give us the difference, so that we can be able to calculate humidity using this. The dry bulb thermometer we basically just record it as a temperature read. This is the crystal ball. Normally we insert the card in there, so when the sun shines through, it bends the card. So we know how much sunlight has been there and when the clouds have come through. So basically this is what we call the recording of the sunshine hours. Evaporation pen, it's basically used for measuring the rate of evaporation. So we have this wind speed recorder, and that's how fast the wind is blowing, and then how much water has dropped down. So basically we get the two measurements, and then it tells us the rate of evaporation. We calculate the rate of evaporation.
So what's the name of the system?
Rain gauge.
Rain gauge. Our nation's only weather office needs improvement on its facilities because the current building, established in early 1970s, is deteriorating. Despite the deteriorating state of the building and less funding support, the weather experts have been doing their work diligently to ensure safe services are provided to inform the public in regards to changes of climate and its effects in the country.
For the maintenance, there's no funding. It's mostly operational costs that we cover. But when there are no maintenance funds, we cannot do any building maintenance. And then it actually, when the building, there's no maintenance on the building, the roof leaks, and then it just affects the computers that we have, the equipment that we have installed. And these equipment are very, very, very expensive. And most of them are donated. It's not through the government funding that we have got.
As the world is changing and different modern technologies are being used, the Weather Office needs a standard facility so that effective meteorological services are delivered in the country.
Welcome back to A Closer Look. Tonight we take a closer look into IMF's entry back into Papua New Guinea, what the latest loan will mean for PNG, and the PNG government's agreement on IMF's funding program with the IMF board.
Earlier midweek, mainstream media had the privilege to meet and hold a roundtable discussion with the IMF resident representative, Dr. Sohrab Rafiq, with a major announcement that a permanent IMF office is being set up in Port Moresby, the country's first for over 2 decades.
To have a permanent base here, and the office is sort of a long-term commitment, and it sort of goes beyond just the 3 years of any IMF financing program agreed with the government of Papua New Guinea. So this is very much a long-term commitment. The PNG is a very important partner.
The proposed location of the new IMF office is at Kina House at Harbour City in Port Moresby. While work is still at its infancy stage, it's not until later this year that the office will be fully established. According to the IMF resident representative, Dr. Sohrab Rafiq, IMF's office will be more than just an office. It's a sign of the importance IMF places on PNG being the largest economy in the Pacific region. The announcement of a permanent IMF resident representative office, the first over 20 years, follows from March the 22nd, 2023, when the International Monetary Fund Executive Board approved a $918 million loan equivalent of 3.2 billion kina under the Extended Credit Facility and Extended Fund Facility for Papua New Guinea, aimed at supporting the government's reform agenda. It was at Parliament House during the last Parliament sitting on the 23rd of March 2023 when former Prime Minister Peter O'Neill, on the floor of Parliament, asked the Treasurer Ian Lynn-Starkey to come out clear and outline the terms and structure of the IMF loan.
And they're urging the authorities, that's you, Treasurer, the need to accelerate structural reform programs. And I quote, you read the statement properly. That's what they are lending you the money. You are not telling us the conditions in which you are borrowing this money.
The Treasurer Ian Lynn-Starkey, in his reply, stated that the IMF loan at 2.4% was a good loan.
Is a good deal at 2.4%. The IMF is not a bailout. It is a good deal.
While the former Prime Minister warns of adverse consequences, the PNG government went ahead and borrowed, with Treasurer Ian Lynn-Starkey downplaying the loan as funds needed for reforms. So the questions remain. What were the structures for the loan for the country? In roundtable discussions held earlier this week with representatives from mainstream media here at the Grand Papua Hotel, the IMF resident representative, Sohrab Rafiq, stated that the 3.2 billion kina loan taken out by the PNG government will be repaid over a longer term at a low interest and below the market borrowing rate for PNG.
So just very, very broadly, the program that has been agreed is for 38 months, just over 3 years. The total financing is close to $1 billion.
Mr. Rafiq highlighting that the loan program was agreed in consultation with the government and the IMF is here to partner with the government and is here for the long term.
The final point I should make is that this program was agreed in consultation with the government of PNG. As I mentioned, the IMF, has in some places has a reputation for sort of dictating to countries what it should and shouldn't be doing.
Taking a broad overview of the look at the IMF's funding program with the PNG government, it has 3 key areas. The first is in budget repair.
The first is sort of ensuring that the fiscal position of the country is sustainable. So if you look at the report that has been published, you'll see that given where we are right now, that public debt in PNG is classed as high risk, so it's at high risk of debt distress. So what we would like to see is the government's efforts to consolidate the fiscal position by bringing down the fiscal deficit. That is something we would like to see continue.
The second is governance and operations of the central bank.
The second element to the program is sort of modernizing the operations of the central bank and in particular of monetary policy. So this has many sort of aspects to it. We would like to see a clearer mandate by the BPNG. At the moment, the BPNG has lots of different mandates. One is to do with inflation, then there's a growth mandate, there's potentially an employment mandate. So we would like to see the mandate made clearer so people understand what it is that the BPNG is trying to do, right? And it can sort of makes it easier to hold the BPNG account to its mandate.
And the third, governance and anti-corruption framework.
Third part, governance and transparency reforms. And so we would like to see, a commissioner appointed for ICAC. We would like to see ICAC operationalized. That's something that's very important for us. And then also, I won't go into the details too much because they're quite technical, but they're all listed here, they're all laid out here. And sort of put in place the necessary regulations so that ICAC can basically perform its role. So these are the aspects of it. As I said, page 53 has all the timelines for when these are expected.
The IMF report for the government of PNG agreeing to an IMF financing program was published on March 29, 2023 and is available online. A copy of the report was also given to the journalists involved in the discussions with Dr. Rafiq, who stated that it was transparent and reiterating that everything discussed in the IMF report was in consultation with the Marape Russell government.
I should make the point that a lot of the policies that I've talked about, that I've mentioned to you, that all of these are in the report, right? If you go to page 53 of the staff report.
The IMF resident representative also revealed that an IMF review mission will also be conducted.
There will be an IMF review mission that will come from Washington. It's not been confirmed, but sometime at the end of this year. And what they will do is they will look at what progress has been made on these reforms. And a report will be written.
Another important aspect contained in the IMF report is on page 52, which shows PNG's proposed quantitative performance criteria and indicative targets March 2023 to March 2024, which shows two QPCs. What the IMF wants is the size of the physical deficit to get progressively smaller over time. By adjusting the deficit slowly, it will protect economic growth.
Quantitative performance criteria, this basically sets out at different dates the sort of the fiscal deficit target, right? And so this is another sort of criteria. These are sort of in terms of quantitative targets that the government will be judged by. And so when the IMF team come here, they will look.
The other important aspect of the program goes back to the perception of the IMF. Looking at section C, we have what is an indicative target. These targets ensure that priority social spending for schools, hospitals and transfers for the most vulnerable in society is protected. This will ensure that the IMF program protects the poorest and most vulnerable and that the fiscal adjustment is not borne by the poorest in society.
Target, right? And there is basically a floor, a minimum spending floor on social spending. Now, what this demonstrates to you is that while we're asking the government to consolidate its fiscal position.
In summation, the IMF funding program with the PNG government is all about strengthening the macro resilience of the country that protects the poorest and vulnerable in society. In a broader overview,
the point that's that I should also really emphasize here is that these targets are not fixed in stone. This was the projection and the target that was set in December. But we know that economies are dynamic. Things happen, right? Global economic events, political economic events.
So is PNG like a crisis-hit country? And why is IMF here? These underlying questions were asked, and this was the response from Dr. Rafiq.
This is simply not the case, right? So let me also set the record straight here. PNG is not Sri Lanka. PNG is not on the brink of bankruptcy.
So is PNG going broke? According to a recent article by JMP Securities Limited, the answer in short is no. While the mere mention of IMF has set off alarm bells in the media and in the community, however, the reality is, as always, more nuanced. While there is a definite risk of Pinji's guilt by association with the IMF, the recent loan acquisition should not be seen as an omen of imminent economic collapse.
Welcome back to A Closer Look. In an effort to address limited manpower, the constabulary has embarked on a massive recruitment drive in all its regional commands nationwide. Reporter Lindy Suharupa takes a closer look on the progress of this recruitment drive.
The Royal Papua New Guinea Constabulary is the national police force of our country. It was formed in the 1940s and has strived to keep its primary function alive and effective in preserving peace and good order and to maintain and enforce the law of our country, Papua New Guinea. The constabulary has played a significant role in the formation and development of our country. However, over the years, the RPNGC has been faced with challenges of manpower shortage. With a rapid increase in our population every year, the RPNGC is always faced with a huge task of maintaining peace and good order. Commissioner of Police David Manning further elaborates on this.
Numerous conversations over the last couple of years as to how we can address the manpower shortage in the police force. I think many reports have been done as to what the state of affairs in terms of our manpower is in the constabulary. And what we're witnessing today is the first time we've gone through this process, in fact committed to a recruitment drive.
Commissioner Manning, however, outlined that this is not a quick fix to get the numbers needed to be in the constabulary. Over the years, the constabulary's manpower has drastically declined in numbers due to deaths, dismissals, resignations, or medical grounds.
This isn't a quick fix. Let me make that quite clear. We are hindered by many other conditions to the rate of building up the numbers in the force. But what I can say is that we're committed to it, and what you see today is the constabulary's efforts in recruitment, especially recruiting both recruits as well as cadets over a four-year period initially.
In the 2023 RPNGC recruitment drive, Commissioner Manning highlights the processes involved.
It's quite rigorous in verification of ID. We need to know exactly who you are, your verification of your education qualifications. We need to know exactly your qualifications. And of course, as we go through the next process, at some point we will now then go into further tests. There'll be interviews, there'll be written and oral exercises that every candidate has to do. There'll in fact be a medical check to ensure that their candidates are free from substance abuse.
NCD Central and Gulf provinces respectively have begun the screening and entry tests for this recruitment drive, with other regional commands in the provinces to follow soon. As you can see behind me, hundreds of applicants are still awaiting their turn to be processed for interviews. Now all these eager applicants are determined to join the police force in the country. Of course, there are some aggrieved applicants who add their grievances. This is 25-year-old Melissa Saya. She is one of the shortlisted applicants for regular policing from the Central Province, airing her grievance.
Some of the applicants, we know that we will make it through the test because the test is not that hard. It's simple. And most of our applicants, they do the test. Is some of the uni students, they went and do the test. They got no names on the test result, which is why we were questioning.
The RPNGC 2023 recruitment drive has seen overwhelming response by interested applicants. Out of the 48,772 who initially applied, 13,039 were shortlisted nationwide. For NCD Central and Gulf, 3,985 were shortlisted and are currently undergoing screening and entry tests at the Rita Flynn courts. For the Northern and Border Command, 5,261 applicants were shortlisted, with the Highlands Western End Command endorsing a total of 1,153 applicants. Interviews and screening for both commands will begin from the 8th of May to the 2nd of June 2023. For the Highlands Eastern End Command, 1,583 applicants were shortlisted, with scheduled interviews to begin from the 8th to the 19th of May. For Southern Border Commands, 3,668 applicants were endorsed for interviews, which will commence from the 22nd of May to the 2nd of June. The New Guinea Islands Command and the Autonomous Region of Bougainville, a total of 2,505 applicants, were shortlisted, and their interviews will begin from the 5th to the 16th of June 2023. Minister responsible for internal security, Peter Tiamalili, issued a stern warning to everyone involved in this exercise.
We're also ensuring that we are identifying next crop of leaders that will carry forward the police force to be in a better place than what we currently are in and what we are faced with. So this is not a process to satisfy our relatives, to satisfy our leaders, to satisfy our friends or colleagues. I must say on the outset that this process that the Papua New Guinea Royal Constabulary has taken in terms of being very diligent in putting mechanisms to get the best out of the best is so that the organization must live beyond what it is today and what has deteriorated over many, many years because of neglect. This is where Commissioner Manning and his team, they are putting in place a process that it will be much better than what we've inherited.
Minister Tiamalili added that accountability and integrity must prevail throughout the course of this recruitment exercise. Police Commissioner David Manning sounded a somewhat word of advice to the applicants who will be selected in the 2023 recruitment drive.
You are joining the oldest organization in this country. Our existence predated our independence. We are joining an organization that has its own culture, that has been a very key partner in our journey to nationhood. You're joining this organization. This organization is not joining you. You come into this organization, you assimilate yourself with the doctrines of the police force, with the culture of the police force, because in that, the sooner you do that, the quicker you will appreciate why you are here, why you will be wearing the blue uniform, because it is a career that insists on service. We are here for the sole reason to add value to the lives of our people, to provide that necessary support and security for our people. So we in turn continue to build our nation together.
The RPNGC recruitment drive involves officers from the recruitment agency Headhunters, PNG Civil and Identity Registry, and the Measurements Services Division of the Education Department. to check and authenticate the required documents produced by these shortlisted applicants.
And that's all we have for you on this week's A Closer Look episode. Join us same time next week for another episode. From all of us here, pleasant viewing. Good night.